Now, I grew up in a small train town with just my mom and her cat around, my father having passed when I was young. And I never really felt a lack without a dad to watch my back, but there still came a day when Mom said, "Son, I don't know what your pa would say, what lessons he'd teach you today when those bad times go and rear their ugly head. There's one story that I've got, and I'm sure that it'll teach you a lot, so I'm gonna go and teach this one instead." And she got out this old scrapbook and told me I should have a look, and she started to tell me everything that passed. She told me of the day she wed, a happy day, but that instead, that sacred day, it ended up quite trashed. Now I say trash in honor of the state the groom had seemed to love, due to the way he'd been the night before. That night after the practice run, my dad had gone and jumped the gun, taking his best man to a bar in town. Now at this bar in Almontown was this guy Gary, who had found an easy mark within my drunken pop. The insults flew from Gary Port, most of them of the carnal sort, and Dad did what he could to make him stop. Now, here we have the first lesson. See, my dear Dad was 5'6", and that height's all right in a fix, but Gary there was standing 6'4". So when you get into a fight and your head's craning for a sight, just turn around and head out toward that door. This next part, too, is good to know that when someone is going to show some steel on you, you'd better know this rule. Now, fists won't beat an eye for gun, but even not, you'd better run, 'cause the fight's over when they grab the stool. Daddy hadn't been taught this, took a swing and took a miss, but Gary landed two and the scrap. All of that with a swinging chair and my dad dumbly standing there, well, for a minute, before his ankle snapped. Now the best man earned his title fast, got the groom's leg bound up in a cast at the hospital just a mile in his car. Then he knocked on my mother's door, somewhere around 3:45, and told the tale I'd told to you so far. Now don't you worry a second more, we'll walk him through that chapel door. He might be just a little worse for wear. Then walk him through, turned to wheel him in. Before the day could just begin, it turned to, we'll wheel him in a chair. And by the time the noon bell rung, his ankle right in traction hung. The dog said, well, he ain't leaving now. But Grandma and Pa shelled out a grand, and Mom gave in to their demand, and they just had that wedding anyhow. Mom put on that wedding gown and made her way into the town, putting on a Mona Lisa smile. And not a soul abandoned ship, no RSVPs did get skipped. Everyone came right down to Cousin Lyle. My grandpa took her by the arm and tried to keep my mom from harm, walking her himself right down the aisle. The mood was wrong from the get-go, not the joyful, pretty affair, no, the whole thing had the feeling of a wake. And if that weren't all that could go wrong, and this wasn't made up for the song, some dumb SOB went and flipped the cake. So after she made her altar show, by then it had been time to go, with Ma, Dad, Priest, and a couple other pals, to the hospital where Dad lay in bed, broken, beat, and about half dead, and I forgot to mention, the priest looked like Weird Al. Now, Dad was looking quite pathetic, laying there under anesthetic, but still dressed all up in his suit and tie. The legs seemed split right down the side, and that big old casket couldn't hide the shame he was feeling through the druggy haze. And what he said did make her weep before he passed right back to sleep, with that guilt hanging heavy even through the days. He said, Trish, I'm sorry. Well, you get the point. At that point he fell back asleep, and Mama had begun to weep at just what had become her wedding day. But as she closed that old scrapbook and turned to me and took a look at me, she had one last thing left to say. I should have known it'd gone out of whack, but son, I'd never take it back, because I know it got you here today. She patted my back and let me play, and I didn't quite know what to say of the lessons to learn from all that mess. I learned love can make anyone a fool. In bar fights, I learned all the rules, and the kindest soul can learn to hide their stress. And if I ever have a wedding too, I think I know what I would do. And it sure as hell is gonna go get drunk, get into a bar fight, end up half drugged and half unconscious on my own wedding day, wheeled in traction. But still would like to have Weird Al for the gig.